Ethan Cole had worked on Lyra 9 for nearly 6 months, and he already knew how the cold could bury you alive. The planet was beautiful in its way, glaciers that stretched endlessly, skies painted in shades of violet and gray, but it was unforgiving. Nights dropped to temperatures that could freeze a man's lungs in minutes, and storms arrived without warning, sweeping across the mining outpost like ghosts of some long-forgotten war. He was an engineer by trade, assigned to maintain the heating systems and life support grids for the human settlement. Most days were lonely. Human crews came and went, focused on supplies, schedules, and survival, leaving little time for conversation. Yet he liked it that way. Silence gave him space to think, to work, and to keep the ghosts of past battles at bay. On this particular evening, Ethan had just finished checking the energy conduits in the refugee sector, a cold, cramped set of metal pods where the Valari civilians had been forced to live. Their settlement had once been a thriving city, a jewel of Lyra 9, but the war had stripped it bare. Now survivors wandered, scavenging for warmth, water, and food. Human authorities tolerated them, but only barely. Many humans still remembered the war and carried their grudges silently. Ethan had no such grudge. He had seen enough death, enough fear to know suffering looked the same, no matter the skin, fur, or scale. Still, walking among the refugees had a strange, hollow feeling. The Valari were quiet people, graceful in their movements but broken in spirit. The children often stayed inside their parents' arms, too frightened to speak. Their eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, reflecting the dim lights of the outpost, and Ethan had learned that those eyes told stories words could not. As he walked past the metal crates outside the heating hub, he thought he heard something, a faint whimper, almost lost in the wind that screamed across the frozen plains. He froze, listening. The sound came again, softer this time, like a child trying not to cry. Cautiously, he approached the source. Behind a row of stacked cargo containers huddled a small figure, a child no older than 6 wrapped in tattered cloth. A woman sat beside him, her body curled tightly around him as if she could shield him from the cold by sheer will alone. Ethan could see the frost on her silver-toned skin, her trembling hands clutching the child's shoulders. Her eyes met his, luminous and wide, full of fear and something else he couldn't quite place. Desperation, maybe. He hesitated. Bringing unauthorized aliens inside was forbidden, but looking at the child's face, pale and shivering, all he could feel was the weight of the choice before him. He took a step forward. "Hey, it's okay," he said softly. "You don't have to be out here." The woman flinched but did not move. Her lips opened, forming words he couldn't immediately understand. Then slowly she spoke in accented English, halting and careful. "Please, not report. My son, he..." Very cold, Ethan nodded. He knew the regulations, he knew the risks, but he also knew something else. No policy was more important than saving a life. "Come with me," he said, "inside. You'll be safe there." The woman looked at him, uncertainty painted across her features. She held the child tighter, her arms shaking. Finally, she nodded and rose, her movements delicate and cautious. Ethan led them inside, keeping his voice low and soothing. His quarters were small and utilitarian. A single cot, a small table cluttered with tools, and a portable heater that hummed quietly in the corner. It was nothing luxurious, but for a mother and her child it was paradise compared to the frozen wasteland outside. The boy, Kay, curled into a ball near the heater. His lips were blue, his small body trembling. Ethan knelt beside him, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. "You'll be okay," he said, though he didn't yet know how he would make that true. The woman, Lyra, remained standing by the door, hesitant. She studied him carefully as if trying to decide whether he was friend or threat. He offered her a seat. She refused at first, sitting only when she realized her strength was gone and she could no longer fight the cold alone. Ethan noticed the way she avoided his eyes at first, then gradually, she seemed to search for trust in his steady presence. Hours passed in silence, punctuated by the low hum of the heater and the occasional cough from Kay. The storm outside beat against the walls, a constant reminder of the danger they had narrowly escaped. Finally, her voice broke through the quiet. "If I warm your bed, will you let us remain?" Ethan froze, understanding immediately that it was not what it might sound like to a human ear. In Valari culture, offering warmth was a sign of deep gratitude and trust, a sacred gesture of hope and dependence. It was not seduction. He met her eyes gently. "You don't have to offer anything like that," he said. "You can stay, both of you. No conditions." For the first time, she allowed herself a small smile. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. Relief washed over her face, and Ethan felt a subtle warmth in his chest. Not from the heater, but from the understanding that they were safe for now. Kay finally drifted to sleep, curling into the blankets like a small silver comet. Ethan sat back against the wall, exhaustion pulling at him, but he didn't close his eyes. He watched the boy, marveling at how fragile life could be, and how strong some beings could feel despite that fragility. Lyra eventually sat on the edge of the cot, close enough to feel the heater's warmth. She didn't speak at first, but then she began to tell stories about her home planet, cities that floated in the clouds, forests that glimmered at night, seas that shimmered under twin moons. She spoke in her soft, melodic voice, and Ethan listened, mesmerized. He asked questions sometimes, and she answered carefully, never assuming he would understand, but slowly the distance between them shrank. She laughed softly at one point, a sound that was like the first bloom of spring after a long winter. He realized that in all his years he had rarely heard a sound like that, one so filled with hope and resilience. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, they built a fragile sanctuary, a pocket of warmth and trust in a universe that had offered them little. The hours passed, marked only by the rhythm of Kay's breathing and the quiet moments of conversation between Ethan and Lyra. As the night wore on, Ethan reflected on the absurdity of the situation. A human engineer and a refugee alien mother, trapped together in a tiny metal room on a frozen planet. By all rights, it should have been tense, fearful, or awkward. But it wasn't. It was human, compassionate, necessary. Something deep within him stirred, a recognition of what humanity could do in a galaxy that had too often forgotten mercy. By the time dawn threatened to break the long night, Lyra had leaned back against the wall, her eyes closing for the briefest rest. Ethan remained vigilant, watching the small silver shape of Kay, feeling a profound responsibility to these fragile lives. It was only a beginning, he knew. Challenges awaited them, discovery, prejudice, danger. But for now, in this quiet, fragile room, they had survived. For the first time in months, they were safe, and in that moment, Ethan understood something profound. Survival was not enough. To be human, to truly live, was to act with kindness even when the universe gave no reason to. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He didn't know if the world outside would allow them to exist. But he did know that tonight, they had found warmth, trust, and the faintest spark of hope that would carry them through the storms to come. Days passed slowly at the Elira 9 outpost, each one a quiet struggle against the cold and the isolation. Ethan Cole had settled into a new rhythm with Lyra and Kay. Every morning, he would check the heating grids and repair broken circuits while Lyra helped care for Kay, teaching him how to move with balance over the icy floors and how to avoid the hidden dangers in the outpost. Kay had already grown stronger in those few days, and his small laughter began to echo faintly in the corridors, a sound that seemed almost alien in the bleak, industrial environment. Ethan noticed the change in Lyra as well. She seemed more at ease, her shoulders less tense, her steps lighter. The gratitude in her eyes never left him, but it was deeper now, more sincere, as if she had come to understand that humans were not all enemies. She often shared more stories about Valari culture, of sky palaces, of forests that glowed with light, of songs that could make water shimmer, and Ethan listened with genuine fascination. Their worlds were so different yet so similar in the simple truths of survival, love, and family. One evening, as the twin moons of Elira 9 cast silver light over the icy landscape, Ethan was checking the power grid near the outer edge of the settlement. The wind screamed across the frozen plains, carrying the distant howls of frost beasts that had made their home among the glaciers. He had been alone only moments when a sharp alarm echoed through the outpost. Security protocols had detected unusual energy fluctuations. He froze, realizing the reading was coming from his quarters. Panic struck him, but he forced himself to stay calm. "They haven't discovered them yet," he whispered under his breath. He hurried back, snow crunching under his boots, mind racing. Commander Riggs, the human overseer of the outpost, had always been suspicious of Ethan's assignments. Any hint of alien presence in human zones could trigger immediate punishment, or worse. Ethan prayed that Lyra and Kay had hidden effectively. As he reached the quarters, he found the door slightly ajar. His heart sank. Inside, signs of movement. A chair moved, a tool knocked over, made him fear the worst. "Lyra, Kay!" he called softly, his voice trembling, though not with fear alone. Relief washed over him as he heard the faint, trembling reply from behind the cot. He found them huddled together, Kay rubbing his eyes, shivering. Lyra's face was pale and fear glimmered in her silver eyes. Ethan quickly shut the door, pressing his hand to the wall as if he could shield them from discovery. He had been so careful, and yet he realized that the slightest misstep could destroy everything they had built. The next morning brought no relief. Commander Riggs had begun an official investigation. Security teams moved through the corridors, scanning, questioning, searching. Ethan knew he had only hours before the alien's presence would be discovered. He had to act quickly. He returned to his quarters and found Lyra awake, tending to Kay as he struggled with a cough. She looked up at him, her expression a mixture of fear and determination. "They will find us," she whispered. "We must leave," Ethan nodded. "I know, but the storm is fierce. You can't survive outside tonight. I'll get you out safely." He spent the day preparing. The shuttle he had repaired months ago, a small, outdated craft meant for local transport, would be their escape. It wasn't fast or well-armed, but it could carry them off-world to a nearby free colony where Valari refugees were welcome. He packed supplies, warmed the engines, and tested the navigation system, all while keeping an eye on the corridors outside for soldiers. Lyra helped where she could, hiding herself when patrolling humans drew near, but her presence was invaluable. Her knowledge of crystal-based energy allowed him to optimize the shuttle's limited power supply, giving them a better chance to escape the frozen wasteland. That night, snow fell relentlessly, covering the outpost in a white blanket. Ethan, bundled in his coat, moved quietly through the corridors, checking every corner. He found Kay awake, small hands clenched into fists, eyes filled with confusion and fear. "Hume," he whispered, the Valari word for protector. Ethan crouched beside him. "I'm here, Kay," he said gently. "We're leaving. You'll be safe soon." Kay's small hand touched his, trusting him entirely, and Ethan felt a warmth that no heater could provide. Lyra appeared silently behind them, her expression tense but resolute. Together they slipped toward the shuttle bay, every step a careful balance between speed and stealth. As they approached the shuttle, the sound of alarms suddenly blared through the outpost. Ethan's heart leapt. Someone had triggered a sensor. Riggs's team was close. Without hesitation, he lifted Kay into his arms and motioned for Lyra to follow. Go now," he urged. They sprinted through the final corridor, snow blowing through the open doors as the cold rushed in. Ethan struggled against the weight of Kay and the wind, but adrenaline kept him moving. They reached the shuttle and he activated the hatch with trembling fingers. The engines roared to life, warmth flooding the small cabin. Lyra climbed in beside him, Kay clinging to her. Ethan sealed the hatch and engaged the thrusters. The shuttle shuddered and rose, leaving the outpost behind, disappearing into the blizzard. Below, the lights of Riggs's patrols flickered as soldiers ran across the frozen ground, too late to stop them. Ethan exhaled sharply, gripping the controls. "We made it," he whispered, though he knew the journey was far from over. The flight through the storm was tense. Visibility was near zero and the shuttle shivered with every gust of wind. Ethan guided it carefully, using Lyra's crystal energy knowledge to maintain power efficiency. They soared above the icy plains, leaving the outpost and the dangers behind. After hours of careful navigation, the storm began to clear, revealing a distant planet, lit softly by its sun. It was a free colony, a place where Valari refugees could live without fear of human prejudice or enforcement. Ethan slowed the shuttle and descended toward the landing pad, his eyes scanning for signs of welcome or danger. As the shuttle touched down, the ramp lowered, and the cool but manageable air of the colony greeted them. Lyra stepped down first, Kay following closely, clutching her hand. She looked back at Ethan. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice full of emotion. "You risked everything for us." Ethan smiled faintly, feeling a sense of relief unlike anything he had experienced in years. "You asked me to let you stay." "I kept my promise," he said. For the first time in a long while, Kay laughed, his small voice echoing across the landing pad. Lyra's shoulders relaxed and she looked up at the sky, letting herself feel hope again. In the following days, Ethan remained in contact with the colony, assisting remotely with repairs and energy distribution. News spread of a mysterious human engineer who had rerouted power grids to keep refugee shelters alive across multiple planets. Stories described him as relentless, resourceful, and compassionate, a man willing to defy rules to protect those in need. Weeks later, Kay looked up at the stars one night and whispered, "Hume is watching us, Mom." Lyra smiled softly, holding her son close. "Yes, Kay, he kept his promise." Ethan, back at the outpost, watched the same stars from a distant observation point. He felt a strange sense of pride and fulfillment. The universe was vast and often cruel, but he had made a difference. He had shown that humanity could be more than survival and conquest. Humanity could be hope, courage, and compassion. The storm on Lyra 9 had passed, leaving behind a planet still cold and unforgiving. But Ethan had learned a simple truth. Sometimes, the warmth of a single human heart could change the lives of others, even across the stars. And somewhere out there, beyond the icy plains, a Valari mother and her son thrived, carrying the memory of that warmth, that courage, and that promise, proof that humanity's best qualities could touch even the most distant corners of the galaxy.